welcome to Nelson All Over. Today we're finishing up the board game ABCs. It's crazy. It feels like it just started. I guess it did, but I mean, we're here and we are talking about the board game ABCs. So a single game for each letter of the alphabet. If you missed the last couple, they're going to be down below and they may be popping up here. Kind of depends on where you want to look. That being said, today we are taking a look at T through Z, the hardest letters of the alphabet to find board games for, but I found some. I cheated a little bit, but we'll talk about that when we get there. Let's dive in with T. We've got the Taverns of Tiefenthal, yet another Wolfgang Warsch game. I think I have talked about at least one other. I know I talked about Quacks of Quedlinburg on the last one. Same designer, really excellent deck building, push your luck mechanism game. I really enjoyed this game. It's a game where you are running a tavern and you are trying to attract the most wealthy patrons so that you can brew the best beer so that you can win the most victory points. Really love the theme. I love the craft beer, and so kind of drew me in. But also I love deck building games. The push your luck in this game worked really well, I thought. And then also I really appreciated, especially about the core game. I think there's an expansion. I've not played that, but about the core game, there's multiple different modulars inside this box where you can add in progressively and make the game more difficult and more engaging and more complex, but you don't have to play with all of them. And so you can choose the level of complexity that you want to play. If you're playing with a new player, maybe just play I hate the word vanilla, but like the core, no modulars inside, so that they can get a feel for how it all works, and then you can slowly start adding them in. You start at a fairly complex game. It's not overly complicated. It's not going to be, topping 4.0 weight on BGG or anything like that, but it's not a Harry Potter deck building level 1 game, right? It's got meat to it. It's got meat without the modulars, and then when you add those in, it just it's nice because it feels like an expansion. It feels about like 6 expansions inside one box, and it's not even an expansion. Taverns is really cool. I like how the strategy evolves as you add in different modulars and how you can lean and flex into utilizing those and which modulars you're including. It kind of completely can change your strategy. And then also it's just fun to have combined a push your luck type mechanism. And it's not really push your luck. You draw until you fill up your tables, but that can feel like push your luck, especially because you get tokens throughout the game where you can say, I'm going to scrap this and I'm going to try again. You take all the cards that you drew out and then you redraw. And so you have a little bit of, okay, can I work with this, or do I really need to work more? So that's the deck building part, and we haven't even talked about the dice drafting, dice placement part. When you're placing out all your patrons and all of your bar workers and upgrading your bar mat and everything, you're drafting dice with the other players, and you're going to be assigning those dice to different positions on your personal board that will activate either brewing beer, generating income, allowing you to upgrade your bar mat so that you have more seats for your patrons. All in all, it's a really well-designed game that plays in about an hour and works pretty well with 2, even better with more because of the drafting mechanism. But Taverns of Tiefenthal is one of my favorite deck builders out there because it's so unique and it has so much modularity in it. Let's talk about my game that I picked for you. I don't know if this is a surprise if you have seen my top 5 board games of all time, but Underwater Cities made that list. Underwater Cities is in my top 5 board games because it is so good. Talk about it's another worker placement. So Taverns, I don't know if I would necessarily assign it as a worker placement. This could be something that we talk about later. But when I think of worker placement, I think of my placement of my worker can hinder someone else's placement of my worker. That's not exactly how it works in Taverns, but it is how it works in Underwater Cities. But this game, I will link the top 5 video because I go in, there's a lot of B-roll and kind of talks about what you do in this game, but you're expanding civilization underwater, expanding on your own personal board while taking actions on the communal board. And the core mechanism in this game is a worker placement where you can place out on one of the action spaces of 3 different colors. Whenever you place a worker, you also get to play a card from your hand. Now, if the card matches the color of the action slot, then you get the benefit of that card. What's cool is that the green action slots are typically like the worst action slots, but they have the best cards, the yellow is vice versa, and then the red is kind of a happy medium between the two. And so it kind of forces you into making a lot of tactical decisions on, can I take a worse action in order to play this better card out of my hand that may benefit me in the long run, or do I need to snipe that yellow position from my opponent who's about to score a city, and I need to get that city before them so I can reach this objective. I could talk about underwater cities for a long time. This is one of those games that does not get to the table as much as I wanted to because of its runtime. It is a pretty hefty game. It's not short. I think I probably average around an hour and a half to 2 hours with a 2-player game, and that is getting harder and harder to put onto the table, especially with the expanded library of games and the available games that we have now. They can give a similar feel and a much easier and more bite-sized experience. However, that being said, Underwater Cities I don't think we should discount, and then the expansion helps with that. The expansion cuts the game time down significantly. The only problem with the expansion is it costs as much as the base game, and so you're going to be spending an arm and a leg for both boxes. That said, highly recommend the expansion. I think it's one of the best expansions of all time. Underwater Cities by Vladimir Suchi is it's so good. It's so freaking good. It turns out that today is just the worker placement day because up next for V, we have Viticulture. Maybe it's just that designers like to name games that have worker placement mechanisms near that letter, that W letter of the alphabet. That's why we have Viticulture and Underwater Cities so close to it. But Viticulture is a game designed by Jamie Stegmaier, published by Stonemaier Games, and it's a game where you're competing with other players to produce wine. Also, I have wine and beer, and I again, these are not my favorite games, or these are just ones I wanted to talk about, and apparently I was thinking about alcohol when I put together the back half of this list. But Viticulture, you're competing with other players in order to make the best wine, fulfill orders, build up your vineyard, and race to victory. What I like about this game, and I did not like it the first time, is it has pretty much an exponential growth in victory points. And so you're playing to, in the core game 20, I would not play this game without Tuscany. Tuscany was part of my necessary expansion video. I don't know if you have seen that, but that's also maybe going to be linked about right here. But Tuscany adds so much to this game. Viticulture World is phenomenal. That turns it into a cooperative experience. I also talked about that in that video. But let's talk about Viticulture. You're racing to 20 to 25 points, depending on if you're playing with the expansion or not. And the first 80% of that game, you're probably going to be sitting in under 10 points. And it is a mad rush, explosive growth to that final victory point marker, which is kind of crazy the first time, because the first time you play it, because you start looking at it and you're starting to calculate, and you're like, oh my goodness, I think I can get there this turn. I can score like 12 points this turn. And you only have 13 points. And so it takes a little bit of time to understand the cadence of the game and understand when people can be explosive. And you have to look out, because striking distance to victory is much, much shorter than you initially think. And so Viticulture is a game that the box has seen some love. I've transferred everything into the Wine Crate box, which is this big box that holds all the expansions, and I really appreciate that Stonemaier put that out, because now everything fits in one box. But Viticulture is just a phenomenal game. I picked this up right after Gen Con in 2019, I want to say. Maybe 2020? No, it wasn't 2020. There wasn't a Gen Con in 2020. So it may have been 2019, and we have played the heck out of it since. Viticulture. Now, it would make sense if I had a worker placement for the W, but I do not. I have War of the Ring. War of the Ring is... it's epic. So if you know me, if you've watched my other channel, Nelson All Over Cards, you know that I love the Lord of the Rings IP. Lord of the Rings is one of my favorite book series of all time. I love everything Tolkien. I love everything Lord of the Rings. And so I had to pick up War of the Ring, which is a 2-player war game. And you don't get a lot of those. Like, we have the Twilight Struggles, but typically in war games, they work much better at a higher player count. This one is only 2 players. Actually, you may be able to play it 4, but it's designed for 2 players. One person plays the Shadows, one person plays the Fellowship, and the Fellowship's goal is to get the ring to Mount Doom and destroy it. They have mechanics where they can hide, where Sauron is and the shadow forces are trying to find the ring bearer and pick off members of the fellowship before they can reach Mount Doom. While they're doing this, the shadow's also trying to take over Middle Earth by winning battles. So not only are you controlling the fellowship as the good players, but you're also controlling Gondor and Rohan and all of the allies in order to try and dispute Sauron's forces and Isengard's forces. And it's so cool. You can play out the events of Lord of the Rings, and it's epic. All that to say, I never play it. I never get to play this game, and that is because it's hard to get to the table. It's a long game. I need to find another player, a single player, that would want to sit down and be able to play this for like 4 hours. I'm sure I could find one, but it's just hard. It's so tough, and the rules are dense. It would take a lot of commitment for 2 players to get through it. Now, if you have that in your life, this is the game for you, right? If you are able to put together and manufacture that situation, please pick this game up, because I want to live vicariously through you, but I never get to play it. Will it ever leave my collection? Probably not, because I love seeing it on the shelf, and I would be so sad getting rid of it. It took me forever to find it, and I finally did, and I played it maybe twice. I think I played it twice. Just not enough. I need to play this game. It's so sick. There's so many expansions. I've never even thought about getting the expansions just because I never get to play it. So I want the expansions for the lore and for the excitement of having the expansions, but here we are. War of the Wing. Yeah. Bummer. But epic looking game. Really fun when you do get to play it. It's just really tough to get there. We got 3 more letters, and this is where we start to cheat because there are not a lot of games with these 3 letters. Now, there are some games with X. There are not a lot of games that I have played that start with X, and so we're gonna strike one, cheat right here, and we're gonna do the search for planet X. I think I make the rules, so I guess this isn't cheating, but anyways, the search for Planet X is a deduction game where you are competing to find Planet X before any of your opponents. It is an app-based game where you sit there and you have an instance of the app running. You're able to take a look and ask, and you're trying to find multiple different instances of things in the galaxy to eventually find Planet X. When you start the game, the app will tell you some specific pieces of information, and then you can utilize actions to find out more pieces of information and solve for that deduction puzzle of where Planet X is. I have not played this a lot. I enjoyed my first play. I don't know why. It just hasn't drawn me back. I love the art. I love the idea behind it. But it feels very multiplayer solitaire, which maybe I just need to play it solo. Maybe that's fine. Maybe it's fine to be multiplayer solitaire. But for some reason, the first play I enjoyed, but I've had no desire to pull it back out. And that being said, it may go on that the trade list, which we'll see. But before I do that, I need to give it more tries. I've been talking over the last couple of videos about how I need to give games more tries, give them a second time around. I need to do that with Search for Planet X because it is a game that, on paper, it sounds like something I'd really enjoy. So maybe it's just something that I need to try again. You know what? I'm gonna do that. I've convinced myself. Here we are. I'm just talking to you all. I've convinced you. You have convinced me. You all have convinced me. I'm gonna go try Planet X this week. I'm gonna do it this week. We'll see how that goes. Alrighty, Search for Planet X is my X game of the video. Moving on to the next letter of the alphabet. Y is another letter I'm going to cheat at. I could talk about Yahtzee, but I already talked about Dice Throne here, which is the battle version of Yahtzee and just a better version. We're going to talk about Yellow and Yangtze. So this is a kind of 2.0 version of Tigris and Euphrates. I have not played Yellow and Yangtze, and it's the first game on the list I think that I have not played, but I really want to. I played Tigris and Euphrates. I enjoyed it. I think we had a couple of rules incorrect, and so I've only ever played it one time, and that was a long time ago. So Yellow and Yangtze being the 2.0 implementation of Tigris and Euphrates really intrigues me. From what I understand about the game, again, not playing it, it's a tile laying game where you're working to grab victory points, and based on the number of tiles around a specific leader, if you place tiles next to that leader, whoever controls that area, that city, gets bonus points based on what color tile is placed there. Now, what I really like and what really draws me into this type of game is the scoring. The way that it works is that you get your final score is the lowest of what you scored. So if I think there are 5 different scoring categories, and if you score like 5, 10, 15, 22, your final score is going to be 2. It dissuades you from leaning into one strategy and requires you to make sure that you're multitasking and picking up victory points all around the table in all of the different categories in order to score properly. It feels like a fairly abstract game where you're placing tiles out on a different map trying to score, and then there's a warring mechanism that I don't quite understand or remember how it works, but it feels like a game that is right up my alley, and it's a game that starts with Y, which is why we're talking about it now. But yeah, Yellow and Yangtze is a game that's been on my radar for a couple of years now. I've just never found myself in a situation that has required or allowed me to play it, so that's why. And then strike 3, I struck out on the last 3 here. My Z game is a double whammy. It's Great Zimbabwe, so it's a Z with Zimbabwe, and is a game that is still in shrink. This is a game by Spiel, the people who make Food Chain Magnate, which is a game that we talked about. This is actually the F pick of the list. Food Chain Magnate is a cutthroat game, and the Great Zimbabwe, as far as I understand it, is no different. This is more of a supply chain management type game where players are trying to move goods across maps, and it very much a placement spatial puzzle, similar to Food Chain, but I think a little bit more spatial in the Great Zimbabwe. What really drew me to this game, other than just kind of the publishers and how much I enjoyed Food Chain, and seeing this as kind of one of the other games that they are, very well known for, the Great Zimbabwe, one of the coolest parts of this is the scoring mechanism, where you don't pick how you're going to score or how you're going to win or your asymmetrical power at the beginning of the game. What you do is, at some point during the game, you're going to choose a deity to worship, which gives you an asymmetrical power, as well as adjust your victory point target. So I think you're shooting for 20 victory points at the beginning of the game. Once you pick a deity, based on that deity's power, or that the patron's power, I apologize if I'm not using the correct terminology. It's in shrink, but that will adjust your power. So if you pick someone that gives you an incredibly powerful asymmetrical power, you may now be shooting for 25 victory points rather than 20. Or if you pick someone that has a little bit weaker of a power, and maybe even a detriment, you're shooting for 16 instead of 20. And so once you have that set and you cannot change after you've picked it, you play and lean into that strategy at that point, and that just screams replayability to me. And it's one of these games that for some reason, it's still in shrink. There was a period of time over the last couple years, and I'm starting to get out of it, where I was super into heavy strategy games, and then just life circumstances happened, and I kind of was very much put off by them. And during that time, Great Zimbabwe showed up on my doorstep from a pre-order, and so I think that kind of all leaned into it. But the Great Zimbabwe is a game that I will play soon. I'm going to put a timeline on it, just like I did for Search for Planet X. Let's say that we are going to get the Great Zimbabwe played next month. Cool. In April, April's super freaking busy. In May, by the end of May, I will have played Great Zimbabwe, and we will talk about it again on the channel. So hold me to that. Whatever you need to do, send angry messages my way if I don't play the Great Zimbabwe. But Great Zimbabwe by Spiel. Thank you so much for hanging out through the board game ABCs. I did cheat a little bit there at the end, but that's half the fun of it. I loved talking about this. I'm really excited to play some of these games towards the latter half. I hope that you enjoyed my ramblings about the other ones. What are some of your favorite games for these specific letters of the alphabet for T through Z? Are there ones that you figured out with X or Y or Z? There are some out there. So let me know what your favorites are, and let me know if you figured out a way to not cheat and get one that starts with that letter. Thank you all so very much for hanging out. I appreciate you watching. If you enjoy this content, feel free to subscribe to the channel. It does help a lot. And I hope that you all have a fantastic time board gaming. And I will see you around. Peace.